Let me introduce our guest today. So most of you probably know Sylvia, but maybe you don't. So let me give her a proper introduction. By the way, my name is Adrienne Pennebrae. I'm an ABM practitioner and I live in Virginia. Sylvia Shordike is our guest today. And let me just introduce her a little bit. Sylvia is an ABM practitioner, and she worked at the ABM Center for many years. She was also a trainer at the center. She moved on. She's now the founder of the NeuroHorizons Experiential Movement learning programs and the author of NeuroHorizons Primer. Sylvia is also one of my own personal mentors. Welcome, Sylvia.
Thank you, Adrienne. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very excited to talk to everybody. And I really invite everybody to jump in and ask me any question you like. Feel free to do that. Yeah, Adrienne, want to say what this day is about?
Yeah, actually, I want you to say what this day is about because we had a really cool title, Learning with Kids, and with specific words that you were very specific about. Feel, sense, see. What's possible?
I think what the title was, When More is Possible. When we watch this video, I think we can start the conversation about why I'm wanting to point this out. And now I would like to show you how one of my graduates used the four corners very successfully with their own baby. Her 10-week-old girl is wiggling her limbs and she's flexing, but when you look at her chest, you can see how her chest is lifted up quite a bit and her sternum is not very active in moving. So in other words, she's moving the four corners, but her chest seems to be a bit stuck and her neck is not very free. I reminded the mother to go to booklet 1 and work with her baby with the articulation of the ribs and the sternum and under the shoulder blades, basically doing the four corners which you just learned, which the mother did. And now, if you look at the same baby just a day or two later, you can see how much more the sternum and chest are moving. Her neck is freer. That's why she moves her head more. It's easier for her to look straight ahead. And you can see how the whole spine flexes more because the chest can sink and the sternum can move left to right and her shoulders and arms are freer. And not only that, she's more expressive in her face and her pelvis is also rolling much freer from side to side. And this is after just a couple mini lessons from the mother working with her baby. And I wanted to show you this because here we're looking at a healthy neurotypical baby. Yet, for whatever reason, her chest was too rigid. And sometimes we don't know why. It could be the positioning in the womb. It could be the birth was too stressful. It could be because the baby in the beginning was held in unfortunate ways. Sometimes it's hard to put the finger on it. But what matters is that with the embodied self of the mother and the quality of her touch, the organization of this baby has completely changed. Just a day or two later, that's what's important. So since I don't have a video of the mother working with her own baby, I want to show you how I work with the baby with these same embodied principles. So you see how I touch the articulation of the ribs and the sternum. And at the same time, I'm working behind the shoulder blade, the scapula. And then I connect that with working with the occiput and the first vertebra of the spine, the atlas. So these are just a few elements, a few tools of many that we learn in my seminar program.
I was with a little kiddo this morning. I tried some similar approach, but so very spastic and did not get a lot of movement in this area. Do we just, little bits at a time, we just try to encourage other movement is what I'm guessing, but didn't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Of course, you saw me there with this baby. This baby was sleeping that I work with. So I had the opportunity to do a lot of little detail work because the baby was asleep. Comes in very handy when that happens. However, most of the time I have babies exactly like you're talking about. So the approach here in my experience is always you go with the system first. First of all, I find a position where I can work from a little easier. That means when I have a child that is on the back and for whatever reason, the child goes right away into a reflexive modus of motor reflex or pressing into the table, pressing the head and going into overarching. That often can happen. And that means the child is not comfortable on its back. When I see that, when I feel that, I change that. Because I want to give myself a better starting position that I don't have to, so to speak, fight that much spasticity or any over-reflexive reactions because the child's brain is so busy with that. So first I find a position where I feel the nervous system of that child is not so overreactive. So maybe I bring a wedge, like a big one. So I have the child's head and the shoulders a little bit higher up, so it's not completely flat. Sometimes I use my legs. Sometimes I have the child lean into me and I do the same movements, but more in a sitting position and the child leaning into me. So that's what I do first. First, I find a position where the nervous system of that child is not so overreactive. Then you still have to deal with spasticity and the articulation is not very available, all that stuff. But then you have a better starting point. And as you saw with the baby, I also was going in the other direction. I wasn't just bringing the shoulder forward and the sternum forward. I also went the other way. So then I find all these tiny little trajectories in relation to what my vision here is. And I create so many different trajectories until more and more articulation will be possible. The other very important part is the neck and the head. The neck and the head sometimes have to be more supported so you don't kick in neck muscles that get overly worked and pull on the chest, on the first upper two ribs, for example, on the clavicle. So then you maybe have to put something under the head. So positioning is a very, very important part in that. So you have a better start. I hope that was helpful.
Thank you.
Hi, Sylvia. Good to see you.
Hi, good to see you.
It was such a great reminder to hear you say like how you go back to the head and neck and the occiput. And do you have anything more specific to add to that? Like how you flow from one area and then go back to the head and neck. And I'd love to dive deeper.
Absolutely. So specifically with this baby that looked so peaceful there, sleeping, what I noticed when I touched that child for the first time, I was very curious about the organization of the neck, which I'm always curious about because it's so important. If the head is not free, then the whole kid is not free. Same is true for us, by the way. And that particular baby had an interesting birthing history. And I asked those questions also. There was also an injury, lack of oxygen. But what was more the case is the way how they got her out was quite dramatic. And sometimes that causes tension in the neck. And that's what I could feel right away. The relationship between the occiput, the skull, and with the first two vertebrae were very, very restricted. I can feel the musculature, how there's no distinction almost between the neck and where the skull starts. And so I get very curious about that. And I want to help the child to change that. So when a child was yanked out in a way where the child only felt the head and the neck gets pulled and the rest is not connected anymore. So then I create relationships so that the brain and the nervous system can put things together again. And it has to be through the child's doing. You can't do it for them. The child has to make the connections through the nervous system. So I remind the child's nervous system and brain, look, you have the skull, but you also have these vertebrae. And especially the first vertebra, the atlas, because the skull sits on the atlas. So all the movements in nursing, in the pecking and the freedom of the tongue have to do with the relationship between the occiput and the first and second vertebra. That all has to be free for a baby so they can roll the head. And then, of course, I bring it to the spine. I bring it to the sternum. I bring it to the pelvis. Let that experience grow. Very important.
I remember this kind of like awakening years ago, but I kind of wanted to bring it up. So you're working with a baby that's sleeping. How is the brain and nervous system when the baby's sleeping? Still there's change. I think, well, there has to be some awakeness.
Sure. I mean, it's always great if you have the child fully aware and then you can really go into the depth of the learning and the connection. But the bottom line, babies sleep a lot. Scientists, they know more and more that babies, they sleep a lot because in the sleeping phases, we do the most brain plasticity. It's in the resting phase. And babies sleep a lot. And their brain is fully there also when we sleep. We're not falling into a coma. So brain plasticity and learning happens in the resting phase and in the sleeping phase. That's why it's also so important to give the children some space, which we come to in the next video. And sometimes, especially when they're very little, it's great when they fall asleep and we can do detail work in these ways when they're not moving as much. Or you don't have to deal with the extreme spasticity because the brain calms down the overactivity of the spasticity in those sleeping phases. You want to use the opportunity to still fully communicate with the brain.
When you think about, first of all, that the mother worked with the child, changes were so outstanding, how much more the responsiveness was there in the whole trunk, the shoulders, the sternum, the pelvis. And that's just always so amazing to me with this work. We can do these little things and they're not outcome driven, they're not goal oriented. It's not like specific, this one thing. But you do these gentle movements and then the whole system can reorganize. And that's amazing.
It is amazing. And the mother sent me the video because she realized that something is not as fluid as it could be. And the mother had a hard time putting her on the floor because she was very colicky. So I showed her some other things to do with the baby, which I also taught her, but she forgot because that mother is actually a full-time professor in Europe. And she has 3 other children. And because the baby was so colicky, when you have discomfort, very often right there, the child starts to pull up the chest. They stiffen the chest and the breathing gets poor. The diaphragm stops working fully in the ideal way. And boom, you have the connection between the head and the pelvis disrupted. And then you will see a baby that cannot freely shift weight from side to side, which they really need to do because they need to feel themselves shifting weight on the floor. If you don't have that, then maybe so many weeks go by and the child doesn't learn really important things because of the discomfort. So then the mother working with the kids and she has the booklet and she has the videos that I give out. And then I told her, do the movements yourself first, embody the movements and then touch, which she did. And she had that quality. You can see how different a development trajectory of a little kid can be. I see, of course, tons of kids who have unbelievable brain injuries, but I see also more and more children who are actually neurotypical. I want to mention Nancy Nidis, who talked about how many babies she gets with torticollis, neurotypical kids. I saw in Spain, I visited my family in Spain this summer, and I saw a dad walking with his baby, couldn't have been older than 2 weeks old. Instead of the baby being in a flat stroller, being flat, he had one of these maxi cozy thingies that you click in the car and you click it out. And now they have the stander for the maxi cozy, and you put the maxi cozy in the stander, and then you go for a walk with your child. And I see this little kid in that maxi cozy, completely crunched like this. The head, of course, it couldn't hold the head, no head control. It was a tiny baby. And it was like this, and the head was like that. And that's how it was sleeping. And that's how you mess up neurotypical kids very easily. Just have them in a maxi cozy all day long. When you see things, you sense, you feel, and then you think. That's the life that we can live and then help.
Yes, the other thing that comes to mind is just the ability for her to even see this. She was in your course, right? So she learned to see this, but for anybody else who looks at this baby wouldn't think anything is wrong. Anybody outside this community, right? They would notice that. And so ability to see that, and that of course also comes from just being on the floor and doing all these movements and noticing these changes in yourself. That then trains your eye to become so acute to notice these subtle things.
Yes.
Hello, maybe this question is a little bit too big for the beginning or in general. I'm working with a child with Canavan disease.
Canavan disease.
Yeah, who doesn't have any movement and doesn't have any reflexive movement. I'm kind of trying to follow what the regular child will do, but he's 3 years old. And at this point, he spends a lot of time in sitting. He has a wheelchair, they put him in sitting. So I work with him in sitting sometime, and I'm questioning if it's a right approach, but this is what it is. And by the way, I do see the big difference after 12 lessons, and parents see the difference. But
when you say he has no movement, does he have a scoliosis now that he sits a lot? Or what is the condition of his skeletal apparatus?
If you look at him, he looks like absolutely happy, normal 3-year-old, a little bit oversized. His arms jerkily like this, and his legs a little bit. Middle doesn't work at all, and the head had minimal movement, and he had a very little eye tracking. Now he moves his head. He tries to lift it a little bit. He has much more movement in arms and legs. He starts opening his hands.
So he is moving.
He's moving much more, but there's no typical reflective movement of a child or...
Well, at that age, he shouldn't have reflexive movements anymore.
He never had them to begin with, I think.
Okay.
Or he lost them after like 5 months.
So he doesn't have any voluntary movements.
He started getting it a little bit.
Well, that's great. Obviously, you're on the right track. So keep working with him. And I would definitely put him as much as you can on the side. And
yes, I do this.
And work with his spine. There is no movement in the middle. So he can only move his limbs. So he has a total lack of awareness of the center of himself. So that's what I would focus on a lot. Work a lot with his spine, head spine, sternum spine. So he makes the connection. All right.
Another video. Do you want to?
Yes, let's watch that and then we can keep chatting.
Okay.
Here I want to share a video of a 5-year-old boy with arthrotoid CP. That means not only does he have to deal with spasticity, but he also has a lot of flaring throughout his body, especially the limbs. I gave this child 10 lessons over the course of 5 days. I helped him to become more aware of his skeletal apparatus in relation to gravity. When he could feel his body more clearly in gravity, that's when he could master the pacing of his movements and the relationship between the head and the pelvis, so he knew exactly what he had to do, which you are about to see in this next video. Here he is on the bed, and he decided to come all by himself off the bed, which he has never done before. And now look at his motor planning. He's very, very intentional about it. He's looking where the edge of the bed is, creeping closer to the edge. The mother is not interfering, which is remarkable. There he's feeling the edge of the bed with his arm, comes up to look again, to check. He's feeling some more, where's the edge? Then he comes down, and now look, he's feeling the edge now with his knee and foot and leg. And there he starts to feel that he has to move his head the other way from where his pelvis is going. He's very intentional about it, very bright, smart. And he keeps doing this. You see how he moves the head to the left, the pelvis comes more and more over the edge of the bed. And there he succeeds to bring the legs down, and then he feels his feet clearly, and he stands up and actually can hold his head for a while. And this is the very first time this boy ever came off the bed by himself and came into standing on his own with his feet flat on the floor. At the time of these videos, his mother had just completed the first segment of my NeuroHorizons seminar program. And so she understands the importance for the child of how they organize their head in relation to the pelvis through the spine. And so she was able to observe what her son was trying to do. And the biggest thing she did is to not interfere. She gave him the space to explore so he could do his own motor planning to succeed to come off the bed. And she gained that knowledge just after the first segment of my seminar program.
Isn't it remarkable how that mother controlled herself not to jump in?
Applause to the mother. Sylvia, again, I think without that experience and that embodiment and that understanding, I don't see that's possible. And I have parents that I'm trying to get into your seminars because that's such a hang up often for the development of the child, the fear of the parent. It was just so beautiful to see. Wow.
That space this boy was given and the observation, how much time he needed for this. He was not in a hurry. He wasn't under a time crunch. He was so intentional. This is what I'm going to do if you let me. But the if you let me wasn't even the question because he felt he did have the space. You could really see how his intelligence, his brain, with all the issues he had and how he managed this acetoid cell pulsing intentionally to succeed is beautiful. And without that space, the mother wouldn't have witnessed it and he would have not had the experience of succeeding. And that is what is so powerful. He gave himself 10 lessons right there by himself.
I just wanted to add, and here again, it's so important to be able to see that he is able to do it, because there was a moment where I could see parents just jump. You see the details, then you could perceive that he was able to do it.
Yeah.
But anybody else, he's falling now.
Yeah, I could feel myself holding my own breath during that. It makes me think about also how we as the adults can impose the hurriedness, the sense of hurriedness and pressure on a child who wouldn't otherwise have that, and how much that can interfere with their own sense of self.
Sense of self. That's the important piece for the children. And that's the main difference when we work and when we see and when we approach the child and the parents. Because it's one unit. You can't separate this. Everybody is so important. Everybody has to learn. Everybody has to grow. Everybody has to be in their process. And then a child like this can have and gain a completely different full sense of self. Maybe he will never be running like a neurotypical child, but that doesn't matter. He can become a beautiful being with beautiful abilities in his own ways and feeling good about himself, and the family feeling good about him, and he feeling good about the family. Of course, it's never totally 100% ideal. We all know that.
I just want to say that the elegance and precision with which he moved his head even before he got off the edge, when he was just sitting on his knees and moving himself, and it's a much bigger head in a very peculiar position for us, but how he managed it, it was extremely beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And he did know what he was doing. And at the end, he put the arm under his head, and it seems like he found another way of balancing it. It was like seeing the rope walking act, all the beauty in it.
And the ability to see that, when you see it that way, you can feel it also inside of you. It's so important. And at the end, actually, when he put his head down, he used the bed to rest, because it's hard work for him to be upright or keep the head upright the whole time. Also, he used the bed to rest because he wanted to see his feet. I don't know if you noticed at the end how long he was actually looking at his 2 feet being flat on the floor. He was really visually exploring that.
I have so much to say about quite a few of the things that you showed, just how powerful it is to embody the work. And that's something that I really learned from you. I wanted to share something that happened with my daughter. So she's had the privilege of taking Sylvia's seminar program, and I was able to do it with her. So I'm able to do this the second time around, and it's just changed her in a phenomenal way. Cognitively, she really struggled with school and getting what was in her mind onto the paper. It was a real struggle, and also speaking in front of people. That was not something that came natural to her, just getting what was in her mind even out of her mouth. It took a long time for her. By segment 5, she got up in front of the class and she just volunteered the information. She shared it with the class that she is able to just knock out essays like no tomorrow. I do not help her anymore at all. She's also she speaks her mind constantly all the time. It's like this new fun little thing that she does. And I love it. My daughter actually really took on, Sylvia, what you said about embodying the work. You not only tell us to do it, but you make it so easy. You provide videos, and it's just 15 minutes a day. And that's the first thing she does when she wakes up every day. And she can teach me a lesson or two. You should come down. I'm cooking breakfast. She goes, Mama, come on, just 15 minutes. Come upstairs with me. And I'm like, oh, I'm busy. I'm doing this. But then I see such a change in her. With see, think, feel, we're walking around town, and she's like, oh, Mama, if I could just get to their middle, we just need to get their ribs moving. Or look at this person walking here. Look how they're holding their neck. Oh, they're not integrated here. And she sees it. She had to feel that in herself first. I've done all of the ABM training, and I just did not have the confidence at all to work with the kids. And I really didn't feel it in my own body. And through doing Sylvia's seminar, I began to feel it more. I began to see it more. I have so much joy now when I'm working with the kids, and started getting phenomenal results as well, because I feel it in myself. You have to do that first, begin to embody the work.
Yeah, tell us more about the seminar, the program, because you got this coming up in Boston.
I'm excited about Boston for the community, actually. I take on like a family of 10, 12. Mostly it's always parents that want to help their child, and I help them to embody and feel. And right from the beginning, empower them, give them tools so they can feel empowered for themselves, but also can empower their child from the get-go, from the very first day or from the very first segment. And because the groups are so small and it's all in person, you have the videos later so you can practice. That's a lot of explanations in those videos, but the actual segments are all in person. So you are there in person. You feel, you touch, you lie on the floor, you do the movements, then you work with each other, you feel touched, you are touched. And because it's such a small family setting, it's so powerful. Nobody falls through the cracks. Everything is a learning opportunity. Like the children need time on the floor. We need time on the floor so we can learn to translate this into our hands and have the quality. It's not something that happens outside of us. It's something that has to come from the inside out. And that always takes some process, some time, the refinement. And the parents, as students lying on the floor, they learn so much from each other. Every story of the child or every change of a child, we learn so much. It's so rich. And what I think is cool about Boston is that the Feldenkrais education of New England, they want to offer education to their community, the parents and the children.
I wanted to say that it's all of that, but it's also the atmosphere you create in the room. It's definitely one of safety. There's no stupid question. We know that we have enough time. It's never rushed. I love it. I really do. It's really beautiful to be part of.
The atmosphere, the container of learning has to be really safe. It has to be a safe learning environment. Parents that had a lot of trauma, you start feeling again, you start breathing again, you dare to look, to observe other children again that are neurotypical. Instead of being in pain, you become curious. All that process is so powerful, but that's why it has to be a safe learning environment. And then everybody benefits from that. That child you saw in the bed, he felt 100% safe and loved in that moment to have enough space to explore his own new discovery and learning. We always can refine. We always can learn more. Luckily, that's what makes it so interesting, yeah?
Yeah, I remember hearing from Mia Siegel. She's like, this is a system of questions. That just stuck with me. Like, yeah, it's just all questions.
Now that you mentioned Mia, I quoted her in my book. She used to live right here in my town. So sometimes we went and had coffee together. So we were chatting about the old days. So interesting. And she told me, there was this trainer and he did this workshop with me. And then afterwards he came to me and he said, Mia, are you crazy? This is all old stuff. You have to develop the method. And I turned around to him and said, I don't have to develop the method. I have to develop and refine myself. And I thought it was such a very cool thing to say. And I quoted that in my book.
If you could give us one takeaway from feel, sense, see, when more is possible, what would you give? How do we do that?
I would say go on the floor, explore the movements in yourself. You can even take one movement lesson, floor lesson. I call it experiential movement lessons. Whatever the trademark name is for the lessons, the ATM, TML, do them. And you can take a piece of them. Maybe play with it the whole week with the beginner's mind. Not like, oh, I did that yesterday. Okay, 1, 2, 3. You know what I'm talking about. Beginner's mind. Can I refine? Can I discover something new? Can I up the quality of how I feel, how I go about it? And with that, you also train every time how you see and how you sense and how you observe. So in other words, I'm just saying, make everything richer. And the way how you do it is by embodying it yourself. And that is a bit of a discipline. You just have to take some time to do that.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Sylvia. And all of you who are here today, thank you for being here. This is just such a rich community, and I treasure these times.
And anybody who wants to be in touch with me about it personally, I'm happy to chat. Thank you, Adrian. This was really a lot of fun.
So much.
Sylvia, thank you, Adrian.
Thank you.
Thank you.